The significance of Greek mythology. Greek mythology is one of the foundational pillars of Western civilization, having had a profound influence on literature, art, and culture for centuries. The myths of ancient Greece have shaped our understanding of human nature, morality, and the cosmos. These stories transcend their historical context, offering timeless lessons and insights into the complexities of the human condition. The impact of Greek mythology on Western literature cannot be overstated. From the works of Homer and Hesiod to the plays of Sophocles and Euripides, the gods, heroes, and monsters of ancient Greece continue to inspire writers and artists. The themes found in these myths, heroism, sacrifice, love, betrayal, and fate, are universal and continue to resonate with audiences today. The influence of Greek mythology can be seen in the works of Renaissance artists like Botticelli and Raphael, as well as in modern cinema, where films such as Clash of the Titans and Wonder Woman echo the ancient stories of gods and heroes. In art, the gods and goddesses of Greece were depicted as idealized forms of beauty and power, immortalizing the divine in sculpture and painting. The Parthenon itself, with its intricate friezes and statues of the gods, remains a testament to how deeply intertwined Greek mythology is with the cultural and architectural achievements of ancient Greece. These myths are more than just stories. They represent the very essence of ancient Greek culture, influencing everything from political thought to religious practice. Greek mythology also served to explain natural phenomena in a way that was both compelling and deeply meaningful. The Greeks sought to understand the forces of nature and the universe by personifying them as gods and goddesses. Thunderstorms, the changing of the seasons, and the growth of crops were all seen as manifestations of divine activity. For example, Zeus, the king of the gods, was often depicted wielding a thunderbolt to control the skies. Demeter, the goddess of the harvest, was believed to influence the cycles of planting and harvesting. Through these mythological figures, the Greeks created a way to explain the world around them, imbuing natural events with deeper meaning and offering a sense of order in the chaos of life. The relationship between mortals and immortals in Greek mythology is one of both awe and fear. While gods are all-powerful, immortal beings, they are not always distant from human affairs. The gods interact with humans, sometimes benevolently, other times capriciously, rewarding loyalty and punishing hubris. Mortals, in turn, seek the favor of the gods through sacrifices, prayers, and rituals, hoping to avoid divine wrath and gain protection. However, even in their most heroic deeds, mortals are often subject to the whims of the gods, illustrating the fundamental theme of fate in Greek mythology. No one can escape their destiny, no matter how great their achievements. Three core themes emerge from these stories: fate, hubris, and divine intervention. Fate is an inescapable force, often depicted as something that no mortal can avoid, no matter how much they try. Hubris, or excessive pride, is seen as a moral flaw that leads to punishment by the gods, a theme that recurs throughout many myths. Finally, divine intervention is a constant throughout Greek mythology, with gods frequently intervening in the lives of mortals, for better or worse, often to ensure that fate unfolds as it should. Understanding mythological structure. Greek mythology, unlike written literature, was primarily passed down orally for centuries before it was committed to paper. This oral tradition shaped the structure and content of the myths, with stories evolving and changing over time as they were told and retold. The myths were not static, they were living narratives, constantly adapted to the tastes and beliefs of different generations. The fluid nature of oral storytelling allowed for a vast array of interpretations, regional variations, and local legends, making Greek mythology a diverse and complex tapestry. Key ancient sources such as the works of Homer, Hesiod, and Ovid have provided the foundation for much of what we know about Greek mythology. Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, are among the earliest and most significant works in Western literature, offering detailed accounts of the gods' roles in human affairs and the heroic deeds of individuals like Achilles and Odysseus. Hesiod's Theogony, on the other hand, provides a genealogical account of the gods, laying out their origins and relationships. Ovid, writing much later during the Roman Empire, drew heavily on Greek mythology, offering a comprehensive collection of myths in his Metamorphoses. Despite the shared foundation, Greek mythology was not a monolithic set of stories. Different regions of ancient Greece had their own versions of myths, sometimes with significant variations. For example, the story of the hero Heracles differs in some respects depending on whether it is told in the Peloponnese or in Thebes. These regional variations reflect the diverse cultural landscape of ancient Greece, with each city-state incorporating its own local deities and heroes into the larger mythological framework. One of the most fascinating aspects of Greek mythology is its cyclical nature. The gods and mortals often experience periods of rise and fall, with power shifting from one generation to the next. The rise of the Olympian gods, led by Zeus, marks the end of the reign of the Titans, but even the Olympians are subject to the same cyclical forces. New heroes emerge, and old gods fade into obscurity or are replaced. This cyclical pattern reflects the natural cycles of life and death, growth and decay that were central to Greek thought and philosophy. Just as the seasons cycle from spring to winter and back again, so too do the gods and heroes undergo cycles of power, conflict, and resolution. In sum, Greek mythology is a rich and complex narrative framework that reflects the values, beliefs, and experiences of the ancient Greeks. Its influence on Western culture is immeasurable, and its stories continue to resonate with us today. Through the myths, the Greeks sought to explain the mysteries of life, nature, and the divine, offering us a glimpse into their worldview, where gods and mortals were intricately bound by fate, pride, and the whims of divine intervention. Primordial chaos. In the beginning, according to Greek mythology, there was nothing but chaos, a vast, formless void that existed before the creation of anything else. Chaos was not a god or a being in the way we think of deities, but rather a state of complete disarray and disorder. This void was not a vacuum, but a place where no structure, form, or law existed. From this primeval chaos, everything in the cosmos would eventually emerge: the heavens, the earth, and all the divine and mortal beings that would inhabit them. The concept of chaos can be understood as both a literal void and a metaphorical representation of the absence of order. This notion of chaos isn't entirely unique to Greek thought. Similar ideas appear in other cultures, but the Greeks gave it a particularly potent cosmic significance. Chaos was a necessary precursor to creation, an idea that aligns with later philosophical concepts of creation from nothing or ex nihilo. Yet, the Greeks also believed that from chaos arose the very principles of order and structure, setting the stage for the divine drama to unfold. From this chaos, the first primordial deities began to emerge. These were not gods in the traditional sense, as they were not anthropomorphic figures with complex personalities. Rather, they were abstract forces that embodied fundamental elements of the universe, forces of creation, destruction, and balance. Among the first deities to appear were Gaia, the earth, Uranus, the sky, Tartarus, the abyss beneath the earth, and Eros, the force of love and attraction. The emergence of these primordial deities marked the beginning of the cosmos' ordered existence. While chaos represented disorder, Gaia and Uranus represented the first glimpses of structure, earth and sky coming together as the building blocks of the universe. Eros, however, was an especially important deity, for it was his force that allowed the universe to develop its potential for life, reproduction, and creation. Without Eros, the very notion of life and generation would have remained unrealized in the cosmos. The first generation of gods. As chaos began to give way to order, the first tangible beings, Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, came into being. They represented the natural forces of the earth and the sky, each embodying key aspects of the natural world. These primordial figures were not born of other gods but existed as elemental beings, manifesting the fundamental properties of the universe. Their union created a new generation of divine beings, whose influence would forever shape the future of the cosmos. Gaia, the earth, was seen as the mother of all life. She was a nurturing and fertile deity, giving birth to a wide variety of creatures and beings that populated the earth. Uranus, the sky, represented the celestial realm, the heavens above, and was often depicted as a vast and infinite dome that stretched over the earth. Together, Gaia and Uranus formed the foundation for life, as their union produced some of the most powerful and important figures in Greek mythology. Among their offspring were the Centimanes, giant beings with 50 heads and 100 arms, who represented the forces of violence and natural destruction. These beings were immensely powerful but feared and disliked by Uranus, who, in his jealousy and fear of their power, imprisoned them deep within the earth, in Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld. Another group of offspring were the Cyclopes, massive one-eyed creatures who were skilled craftsmen and artisans. Though these beings were also imprisoned by Uranus, they would later play an essential role in the battle between the gods and the Titans. Their skills in metallurgy, especially in forging powerful weapons, would prove invaluable to the Olympian gods in their struggle for dominance. However, it was the birth of the Titans that marked the most significant moment in this early phase of the universe's creation. The Titans were the descendants of Gaia and Uranus, and they were powerful, godlike beings who ruled over the cosmos. These Titans represented various aspects of the world, from the oceans to the heavens to the harvests of the earth. The most notable of the Titans was Cronus, who would come to symbolize time and destiny. The Golden Age. The reign of the Titans, also known as the Golden Age, was a time of great prosperity and peace. The world was young, and the Titans, led by Cronus, ruled over the earth with wisdom and justice. Cronus, the youngest and most ambitious of the Titans, overthrew his father, Uranus, in a dramatic act that would set the stage for future conflicts. Uranus, terrified of the power of his children, had sought to imprison them, but Cronus, aided by his mother Gaia, castrated Uranus, thereby removing him from power and assuming control of the universe. Cronus' rule ushered in an era of stability where the earth flourished under the rule of the Titans. This period, the Golden Age, was marked by a lack of suffering and the absence of war. Humans, too, were said to have lived in a time of abundance, where the earth gave them everything they needed and there was no need for labor or hardship. It was a time of bliss, a utopia that would later be seen as a lost paradise, remembered by the later generations of mortals with a deep sense of longing. However, Cronus' reign was not to last forever. A prophecy foretold that Cronus would eventually be overthrown by one of his own children. Fearing this fate, Cronus took drastic measures to prevent the prophecy from coming true. Every time his wife, Rhea, gave birth to a child, Cronus swallowed the newborn whole, hoping to stop the prophecy in its tracks. First, he swallowed Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, each of them disappearing into his belly, leaving Rhea in despair. But when Rhea gave birth to her youngest son, Zeus, she could no longer bear to see her child swallowed by Cronus. Instead, she tricked him by giving him a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes, which Cronus eagerly swallowed, believing it to be his newborn son. Meanwhile, Rhea secretly hid Zeus in a cave on the island of Crete, where he was raised in secret by nymphs and the goat nurse Amalthea. As Zeus grew, he began to plan his revenge. He would eventually free his siblings from Cronus' belly and lead them in a war that would change the course of the universe. The Titanomachy, War of the Titans, birth of Zeus and the Olympians. The conflict that would shape the destiny of the cosmos began with the birth of Zeus, the youngest son of Cronus and Rhea. Cronus, in his paranoia over the prophecy that foretold his downfall, had already swallowed his first 5 children, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, imprisoning them in his belly. Rhea, devastated by the loss of her children, could not bear to see her newborn son swallowed by her husband. So, she devised a clever ruse to save him. When Zeus was born, Rhea took the child to the island of Crete, where she entrusted him to the care of the nymphs and the goat goddess Amalthea. To trick Cronus, Rhea wrapped a stone in swaddling clothes and gave it to him, allowing him to swallow it, believing it was his newborn son. Zeus was then raised in secret, far from the watchful eyes of Cronus. His childhood was spent in the cave of Dict, where he was nurtured by his caretakers, and where he grew into a mighty and intelligent young god. Zeus's early life was marked by his eventual desire for justice and revenge against his father. As he matured, he began to learn of the fate of his siblings, who were trapped in Cronus' stomach. Determined to free them, Zeus sought the counsel of the Titaness Métis, who advised him to trick Cronus into regurgitating his siblings. To do so, Zeus gave Cronus a potion that caused him to vomit up the 5 swallowed children, who emerged fully grown and eager to join the fight against their father. With his siblings freed from their father's prison, Zeus formed the first true alliance in Greek mythology, the Olympians, a group of gods who would oppose the Titans. These gods would go on to wage the Titanomachy, the War of the Titans, which would decide the future of the cosmos. The Great War. The Titanomachy was an epic conflict that spanned 10 years, pitting the Olympian gods against the Titans, led by Cronus. The battle for control of the universe was not merely a physical confrontation, but also a cosmic struggle that involved immense power, strategy, and divine intervention. The gods and Titans each had their own advantages and strengths, and the war was marked by numerous pivotal battles. The Olympians, though initially outnumbered, had powerful allies and divine weapons at their disposal. The most significant of these allies were the Cyclopes and the Centamenes. The Cyclopes, skilled blacksmiths, forged mighty weapons for the Olympians, including Zeus's famous thunderbolt, Poseidon's trident, and Hades's helm of darkness. These weapons were crucial in turning the tide of battle in the Olympians' favor. The Centaumanes, with their 100 arms and 50 heads, were released from their imprisonment in Tartarus and became a formidable force on the battlefield, their strength and power overwhelming the Titans. The war was fierce, with both sides employing complex strategies. The Titans, under the leadership of Cronus, were a well-organized force, and they had the advantage of experience. Cronus, with his immense strength and authority, was a daunting opponent for the Olympians. However, Zeus, with his keen mind and the support of his allies, was able to exploit the weaknesses of the Titans. The most decisive moment in the war came when Zeus hurled his thunderbolts with unparalleled force. The Olympians' victory hinged on these divine weapons, and it was Zeus's ability to wield them with perfect precision that ultimately led to the downfall of the Titans. The battle raged on for years, but when Zeus hurled his thunderbolt at Cronus, it struck the leader of the Titans with such force that it shattered the Titans' resolve. The god's triumph was inevitable. With Cronus defeated and the Titans scattered, the war came to an end. However, the victory did not mark the end of the Olympians' challenges. While the Titans were imprisoned, their influence remained a potent force in the universe. Aftermath and New Order. The aftermath of the Titanomachy brought about a new cosmic order. The Olympian gods, now victorious, had to decide how to divide the cosmos among themselves. Zeus, the leader of the Olympians, took control of the sky, becoming the king of the gods and ruler of the heavens. His thunderbolt was a symbol of his power, and it became the instrument of his rule over both gods and mortals. Poseidon, Zeus's brother, was given dominion over the sea, becoming the god of the oceans, earthquakes, and horses. Poseidon's trident, a gift from the Cyclopes, gave him control over the waters and allowed him to shape the seas and lands according to his will. Hades, the third brother, was granted control over the underworld, the realm of the dead. Though Hades ruled over the underworld with justice, he was often portrayed as a more somber figure, presiding over a realm that was neither heavenly nor hellish, but a necessary domain for the souls of the departed. The division of the cosmos among the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, marked the beginning of their reign and the establishment of their respective domains. However, this new order also saw the rise of Mount Olympus as the seat of divine power, a symbol of the Olympian gods' dominance. Mount Olympus became the home of the 12 Olympian gods, where they resided and held court over both mortal and immortal matters. While the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld, some were spared from the wrath of Zeus and offered positions of influence. For instance, Prometheus, the Titan who had sided with the Olympians, was allowed to continue his role as the benefactor of humanity. Prometheus had helped Zeus and the gods, but his later actions would lead to his eternal punishment. The defeat of the Titans and the establishment of the Olympian rule marked the beginning of a new era, one in which the gods of Olympus would shape the destinies of mortals and immortals alike. The conflict between the Titans and the Olympians was not just a battle for control over the universe. It was a battle that defined the nature of power, fate, and justice in the Greek mythological worldview. As the new order was established, the gods of Olympus would go on to play pivotal roles in the lives of mortals, shaping history, culture, and the very fabric of the universe itself. The consequences of the Titanomachy would echo throughout the myths of ancient Greece, as the Olympians exercised their newfound power in ways that would resonate for generations. 4. The Olympian Pantheon. The 12 Olympians. The Olympian gods, often referred to as the 12 Olympians, were the principal deities of ancient Greek mythology. These gods resided on Mount Olympus, the highest mountain in Greece, and were revered as the primary forces that governed the cosmos and the lives of mortals. Each god was associated with specific domains, and their stories intertwine in complex ways, reflecting various aspects of human existence, nature, and the divine. Zeus, the king of the gods, Zeus was the ruler of the heavens and the earth. As the god of thunder, lightning, and law and order, he was also the enforcer of justice among both gods and mortals. His thunderbolt was his primary weapon, and he was often depicted as a powerful figure maintaining cosmic balance. Zeus's numerous affairs and offspring contributed to many of the mythological tales that defined Greek culture. Hera, queen of the gods and the goddess of marriage, women, and family, Hera was both a protective figure and a vengeful deity. While she upheld the sanctity of marriage, she was also known for her jealousy and anger, particularly towards the many lovers and children of her husband, Zeus. Despite these conflicts, Hera played a crucial role in maintaining the order of Olympus. Poseidon, the god of the sea, Poseidon ruled over the oceans, earthquakes, and horses. As one of the most powerful gods, he was often depicted wielding a trident, which he used to control the waters and cause natural phenomena such as storms and earthquakes. Poseidon had a volatile temperament and was deeply influential in the lives of sailors, fishermen, and those who depended on the sea. Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, harvest, and fertility, Demeter was revered for her ability to bring the earth to life. She was responsible for the growth of crops and the sustenance of humanity. Her grief over the abduction of her daughter, Persephone, caused the seasons to change, with the earth experiencing winter during her mourning and spring and summer during her joy at Persephone's return. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, strategy, and craftsmanship, Athena was known for her intellect, fairness, and ability to bring about victory in both battle and peace. Born fully grown and armored from the head of Zeus, she was considered a virgin goddess and was often associated with the city of Athens, which was named in her honor. Athena's wisdom extended to practical matters, as well as the arts and sciences. Apollo, the god of light, music, prophecy, and healing, Apollo was one of the most versatile gods in the pantheon. He was the son of Zeus and the Titaness Leto and was known for his beauty and charm. As the god of music and the arts, Apollo inspired creativity and harmony. He also played a vital role as a healer and was revered for his oracles, particularly the famous oracle of Delphi. Artemis, the goddess of the hunt, wilderness, and the moon, Artemis was Apollo's twin sister. A fierce and independent goddess, she was often depicted with a bow and arrows, roaming the forests and protecting wildlife. Artemis also held sway over the moon and was considered a protector of women and children, especially during childbirth. Ares, the god of war, Ares represented the destructive and chaotic aspects of battle. Unlike Athena, who represented the strategic side of war, Ares symbolized the raw violence and bloodshed of conflict. He was not widely loved or revered, and his presence in myths often reflected the brutal, uncontrollable nature of war. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and passion, Aphrodite was the epitome of divine beauty and romantic desire. Born from the sea foam, she was said to be irresistible and played a pivotal role in numerous mythological tales involving love and conflict. Aphrodite was also connected to fertility and sexual attraction, and her affairs and relationships were central to many myths. Hephaestus, the god of fire, the forge, and craftsmanship, Hephaestus was the divine blacksmith of the gods. He crafted many of the gods' most important tools and weapons, including Zeus's thunderbolt. Despite his physical deformity and being cast aside by his mother Hera, Hephaestus was a highly skilled artisan and created some of the most beautiful and functional creations in the world of gods and mortals. Hermes, the god of travel, commerce, thieves, and communication, Hermes was known for his speed, cleverness, and ability to move between the mortal and divine worlds. As a messenger of the gods, particularly Zeus, he had the power to convey messages swiftly and was often depicted with winged sandals and a caduceus, a staff entwined with serpents. Hermes was also associated with trickery, guidance of souls to the underworld, and the protection of merchants. Dionysus, the god of wine, festivity, and theater, Dionysus represented both the joyous and chaotic aspects of life. He was associated with ecstasy, intoxication, and the breaking of social boundaries. Dionysus was also the god of theater, where his festivals celebrated both the comedic and tragic aspects of human existence. His ability to bring both madness and creativity made him a god of great complexity. Important non-Olympian deities. While the 12 Olympians were the central figures in Greek mythology, other gods and goddesses held significant influence over various aspects of life and the cosmos. Hades, the god of the underworld, Hades ruled over the realm of the dead. Unlike the more glamorous gods of Olympus, Hades was often depicted as a somber and distant figure. He was the husband of Persephone and was responsible for maintaining the balance of life and death. Although Hades was not part of the 12 Olympians, his domain and power over the afterlife made him one of the most important gods in the Greek pantheon. Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Persephone was the daughter of Demeter and the wife of Hades. Her story is central to the changing of the seasons, as her abduction by Hades and subsequent return to her mother marks the transition between the seasons. Persephone represented the duality of life and death and was both a goddess of fertility and the ruler of the dead. Hestia, the goddess of hearth and home. Hestia was one of the original Olympian gods but was often excluded from the 12. She represented the warmth, stability, and sanctity of the home and was worshipped by families and communities. Hestia's role was central to domestic life, and she was a symbol of the continuity of life and the center of family and community bonds. Pan, the god of the wild, shepherds, and rustic music, Pan was a half-human, half-goat deity associated with the untamed aspects of nature. He was often depicted playing his panpipes and was known for his mischievous nature. Pan's connection to nature and his ability to evoke panic in mortals, from which the word panic derives, made him a unique and beloved figure in Greek mythology. The Muses, Fates, Graces, and Hours, these divine figures played essential roles in the lives of both gods and mortals. The Muses were the goddesses of the arts and inspiration, while the Fates controlled the destinies of all beings. The Graces were goddesses of beauty, charm, and grace, and the Hours were associated with the passage of time, order, and natural cycles. Divine relationships and conflicts. The relationships among the gods of Olympus were as complex and varied as those of mortals. The marriage of Zeus and Hera is one of the most famous divine unions, yet it was often marred by infidelity and jealousy, particularly due to Zeus's numerous affairs with other goddesses and mortal women. These affairs resulted in a host of offspring, many of whom would play important roles in the mythological world. Divine rivalries were also a constant in the lives of the gods. For example, Ares often found himself in conflict with Athena, who represented the strategic side of war, while he embodied its chaotic, violent aspects. Likewise, the tensions between the gods were sometimes exacerbated by their competing interests in mortal affairs. However, despite their rivalries, the Olympians maintained a delicate balance of power, with Zeus often acting as the final arbiter of disputes. The relationships of the Olympians reflect the themes of hubris, excessive pride, and fate that pervade Greek mythology. Despite their immortality and power, the gods were not exempt from the forces of destiny, and their interactions with one another, both harmonious and conflict-driven, formed the foundation of many mythological narratives. Divine interaction with mortals. In Greek mythology, the relationship between mortals and gods was intricate and often fraught with tension. The gods were not distant, detached figures, but rather active participants in the lives of humans, frequently intervening in both benevolent and vengeful ways. Divine actions ranged from acts of mercy to swift and terrible retribution. Mortals could find themselves at the mercy of divine wrath or grace, and the gods often tested human character, pushing them to prove their worth or succumb to their flaws. The concept of divine justice, love affairs, and prophecy were central to these interactions, providing profound insights into human behavior and the consequences of pride, hospitality, and fate. Divine justice and retribution. One of the most fundamental aspects of divine interaction in Greek mythology is divine justice. The gods were deeply concerned with maintaining order in both the divine and mortal realms. Violations of cosmic or societal order often led to punishment, and this was usually meted out swiftly and severely. The importance of xenia, hospitality. The ancient Greek concept of xenia, hospitality, was sacred and held in high regard by the gods. It was believed that proper hospitality, the welcoming of strangers, and the offering of food and shelter were critical to maintaining social order. Xenia also had divine consequences. Zeus, in particular, was known as the protector of strangers and travelers. The violation of this sacred duty could provoke the gods' wrath. One of the most famous myths involving Xenia is the story of Baucis and Philemon, an elderly couple who, despite their humble means, welcomed Zeus and Hermes into their home when no one else would. In reward for their kindness, the gods spared them from a great flood that destroyed the wicked city and transformed them into trees that would grow together, never to be separated. In contrast, the sack of Troy involved violations of Xenia, with Paris, a Trojan prince, accepting the hospitality of Menelaus, the king of Sparta, and then abducting his wife, Helen. This betrayal sparked the Trojan War, showing how deeply the gods valued proper conduct regarding hospitality. Punishment of hubris, excessive pride. Hubris, or excessive pride, was one of the most common offenses against the gods. It involved humans placing themselves on par with the gods or acting with arrogance and disrespect toward the divine order. Hubris often led to nemesis, divine retribution, as the gods sought to restore balance. A classic example of hubris is the story of Niobe, the queen of Thebes. Niobe boasted of her superiority to the goddess Leto, who had only 2 children, Apollo and Artemis, while Niobe had 14. In response, Leto sent her children to kill all of Niobe's children. Niobe's tale serves as a warning about the dangers of pride and the consequences of belittling the gods. Similarly, Arachne, a mortal weaver, challenged the goddess Athena to a weaving contest, claiming to be superior to the goddess. After Arachne's tapestry was found to be flawless, Athena, in a fit of jealousy, transformed her into a spider, condemning her to weave for eternity. Divine tests of human character. The gods frequently tested the character of mortals, often in the guise of strangers or beggars. Zeus, in particular, was known to travel the world disguised as a mortal to test the hospitality of humans. In one story, Zeus and Hermes visited a village in Phrygia disguised as poor travelers, but the inhabitants turned them away, except for Baucis and Philemon, who treated them with kindness. As a result, the gods spared the humble couple while punishing the unkind townsfolk with destruction. These divine tests were a way for the gods to assess the qualities of virtue in mortals, such as generosity, humility, and respect for divine authority. Mortals who failed these tests often faced punishment, while those who passed were rewarded. Mortals who challenged the gods. Some mortals, however, were too proud or too daring to accept their place beneath the gods and often challenged them outright. One notable figure is King Lycaon, who defied Zeus by serving him human flesh during a banquet, questioning the god's omniscience. In response, Zeus turned Lycaon into a wolf, representing both punishment and a warning against testing the god's limits. Another defiant figure was King Pentheus of Thebes, who rejected the god Dionysus and refused to honor him. Dionysus drove Pentheus mad, leading to his brutal death at the hands of his own mother, Agave, who had been driven into a frenzy. This tale highlights the disastrous consequences of disregarding divine authority. Divine love affairs. The gods were not only involved in mortal affairs through tests and retribution, but also in romantic relationships. These divine love affairs often had lasting consequences for both the gods and the mortals involved, and many heroes and heroines in Greek mythology were born from these unions. Zeus's mortal lovers and their fates. Zeus, the king of the gods, had numerous love affairs with mortal women, many of which led to the birth of famous heroes and demigods. Some of Zeus's most famous lovers include Leda, Alcmene, and Danae. Leda, the queen of Sparta, was seduced by Zeus in the form of a swan. She bore 2 sets of twins, including Helen of Troy and Clytemnestra. Helen's abduction by Paris led to the Trojan War, and the tragic fate of her family illustrates the far-reaching consequences of divine love affairs. Alcmene, the mother of Heracles, was seduced by Zeus, who took the form of her husband Amphitryon. Heracles, one of the greatest of Greek heroes, was the result of this union, but his life was marked by a series of trials and suffering due to Hera's jealousy. Danae, the daughter of King Acrisius, was locked away by her father to prevent the prophecy that her son would kill him. However, Zeus visited her in the form of a golden shower and fathered Perseus, who later fulfilled the prophecy by accidentally killing Acrisius. Children born of god-mortal unions. The children born from these divine unions were often demigods, possessing both mortal and divine qualities. Heracles, Hercules, is one of the most famous examples of such a hero, born of Zeus and Alcmene. Known for his incredible strength and numerous labors, Heracles' life was marked by both divine favor and punishment, and he is remembered as one of Greece's greatest mythological figures. Another well-known child of a god and mortal is Perseus, the slayer of Medusa. Born of Zeus and Danae, Perseus embarked on an epic journey to defeat Medusa, and his adventures ultimately led to the founding of Mycenae. The jealousy of Hera. Hera's jealousy is a prominent theme in many stories involving Zeus's affairs with mortal women. Her wrath was often directed at both the mortal women and their offspring, as seen in her persecution of Heracles, whom she tried to kill numerous times during his infancy. Hera's jealousy caused immense suffering for both mortals and gods, highlighting the destructive nature of divine emotions. Transformation myths to escape divine wrath. Many mortals who were the targets of divine jealousy or wrath sought ways to escape their fates. One common form of escape was transformation. For instance, Io, a mortal priestess of Hera, was transformed into a cow by Zeus to protect her from Hera's jealousy. Io's journey, which included being tormented by a gadfly sent by Hera, is a tale of divine punishment and the lengths mortals would go to in order to avoid the wrath of the gods. Similarly, Daphne, a nymph pursued by the god Apollo, was transformed into a laurel tree to escape his advances. These transformation myths illustrate the god's power to alter reality and the consequences of divine pursuit. Oracles and prophecy. Prophecy and oracles played a significant role in Greek mythology, as the gods often foretold the destinies of mortals through oracles. The most famous of these was the Oracle of Delphi, a sacred site where mortals came to seek the wisdom of the god Apollo. The oracles were delivered by the Pythia, the high priestess of Apollo, who was believed to channel the god's voice. The Oracle of Delphi. The Oracle of Delphi was considered the most powerful oracle in ancient Greece. Mortals would travel from far and wide to seek the Pythia's counsel, hoping to receive divine insight into their future. The prophecies, however, were often cryptic, requiring careful interpretation. One of the most famous prophecies was given to King Croesus of Lydia. When he consulted the oracle about whether to wage war on Persia, the oracle responded, "If you cross the river, a great empire will fall." Croesus misinterpreted the prophecy, believing it meant victory for him, but the empire that fell was his own. Apollo's gift of prophecy. Apollo, as the god of prophecy, was the source of all oracular wisdom. He imparted the gift of prophecy to mortals, but his prophecies were often double-edged, revealing the inevitability of fate but leaving little room for mortal action. This theme is particularly evident in the story of Oedipus, who tried to avoid the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother, only to unknowingly fulfill it. The role of fate versus free will. Greek mythology frequently explores the tension between fate and free will. While the gods could foretell the future, mortals often struggled to change their destinies. Some heroes, such as Achilles, were aware of their fates but chose to act according to their desires, regardless of the consequences. Others, like Oedipus, tried to avoid their prophesied fates, only to fall victim to them. Mortals could not escape the will of the gods, and often their attempts to change the future only led to the fulfillment of the prophecy, showing the inescapable nature of divine fate. Heroes and demigods. Perseus, the first great hero. Perseus, the son of Zeus and the mortal Danae, is often regarded as the first great hero in Greek mythology. His story begins with a prophecy that foretold his fate. He would be the one to kill his grandfather, King Acrisius of Argos, who had imprisoned Danae in a bronze chamber after learning from an oracle that her son would eventually kill him. Fearing this prophecy, Acrisius cast Danae and her newborn child out to sea in a wooden chest. Miraculously, they washed up on the island of Seriphos, where they were taken in by a kind fisherman, Dictys. Perseus's path to greatness was set in motion when King Polydectes, the ruler of Seriphos, became enamored with Danae and sought to get rid of her son. He tricked Perseus into promising to bring him the head of the Gorgon Medusa, a terrifying creature whose gaze turned anyone who looked at her into stone. Perseus, though initially reluctant, accepted the challenge. His journey was aided by the gods, who provided him with powerful tools. Hermes gifted him winged sandals for flight, Athena gave him a reflective shield to avoid Medusa's deadly gaze, and Hephaestus supplied a sword capable of cutting through stone. With these gifts, Perseus ventured to the lair of the Gorgons. Using his shield as a mirror to avoid looking directly at Medusa, he beheaded her. On his return journey, Perseus encountered Andromeda, a princess chained to a rock as a sacrifice to a sea monster. With the help of his newfound powers, he slew the creature and rescued Andromeda, later marrying her. Upon returning home, Perseus fulfilled the prophecy by accidentally killing King Acrisius with a discus. Thus, Perseus's life intertwined with fate in both tragic and heroic ways, cementing his status as a central figure in Greek mythology. Heracles, Hercules, the greatest hero. Heracles, known as Hercules in Roman mythology, is perhaps the most famous of all Greek heroes, renowned for his immense strength and numerous heroic deeds. Born as the son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, Heracles faced adversity from the moment of his birth. Hera, Zeus's wife, was furious at the affair and sought to punish the child. She sent 2 snakes to kill him in his crib, but Heracles, even as an infant, strangled them both, showcasing his incredible strength. Heracles' path to heroism was fraught with trials. His greatest challenge came when he was driven mad by Hera and, in his rage, killed his wife and children. To atone for his crimes, the Oracle of Delphi told him to serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns, who assigned him 12 labors, each more impossible than the last. The 12 labors of Heracles were monumental tasks that tested not only his strength but also his courage, wit, and determination. These labors included slaying the Nemean lion, capturing the Ceryneian hind, cleaning the Augean stables in a single day, and retrieving the golden apples of the Hesperides. Each labor was a monumental challenge, but through divine assistance and his own remarkable abilities, Heracles completed them all. Despite these heroic feats, Heracles' life was marred by tragedy. After completing his labors, he faced more personal suffering, including being tricked into wearing a poisoned shirt that caused him unbearable pain. In his final moments, Heracles died and was granted immortality by the gods. He ascended to Mount Olympus, where he was reconciled with Hera and became one of the Olympian gods. His apotheosis marked the culmination of his legendary life, solidifying his place in the pantheon of Greek heroes. Theseus, hero of Athens. Theseus, a legendary hero of Athens, was the son of Aegeus, the king of Athens, and Aethra, a mortal princess. His story is filled with valor, but also with deep flaws, highlighting the complexity of heroism in Greek mythology. One of Theseus's earliest acts of bravery was when he lifted the heavy stone under which his father had left a sword and sandals, tokens to prove his identity. With these items, Theseus set off to meet his father in Athens, a journey that involved several heroic acts, such as defeating robbers and monsters along the way. Upon reaching Athens, Theseus became embroiled in a series of important events that marked his rise to fame. The most significant of these was his defeat of the Minotaur, a monstrous creature half-man, half-bull that resided in the labyrinth, a maze designed by the great inventor Daedalus. Every year, Athens was forced to send 7 young men and 7 young women as tribute to Crete, where they would be sacrificed to the Minotaur. Theseus volunteered to join the tribute, and with the help of the princess Ariadne, who gave him a ball of thread to navigate the labyrinth, he succeeded in killing the Minotaur. However, Theseus's later years were marked by tragedy and poor decisions. After his victory over the Minotaur, he forgot to change the sails of his ship from black to white, signaling his success. His father, seeing the black sails, believed Theseus was dead and threw himself into the sea, resulting in the death of King Aegeus. Theseus's failure to honor his father's memory led to deep regret and remorse. Despite his flaws, Theseus remained a heroic figure for the city of Athens, where he is credited with uniting the various tribes of the region into a single political entity, thus laying the foundation for the power and influence of Athens in the ancient Greek world. Jason and the Argonauts. Jason, the leader of the Argonauts, embarked on one of the most famous quests in Greek mythology, the retrieval of the Golden Fleece. The quest was set in motion when Jason's uncle, King Peleus, usurped the throne of Iolcus from Jason's father, Aeson. Peleus, fearing that a prophecy would bring about his downfall at the hands of a man with one sandal, was soon confronted by Jason, who had lost a sandal while helping an old woman cross a river. The old woman was, in fact, the goddess Hera in disguise. Jason, seeking to reclaim his birthright, was tasked with retrieving the Golden Fleece from the distant land of Colchis. Jason assembled a group of heroes known as the Argonauts, including such renowned figures as Heracles, Orpheus, Atalanta, and Orpheus, and together they sailed aboard the ship Argo on a perilous journey. Along the way, they faced numerous challenges, including clashing rocks, harpies, and hostile forces. Their journey was aided by the sorceress Medea, who fell in love with Jason and used her magical powers to help him achieve the impossible task of seizing the Golden Fleece. However, Jason's success was not without its consequences. After returning to Iolcus, he betrayed Medea by marrying another woman, the Princess Glauce. In revenge, Medea killed Glauce and her father, King Creon, and later took the life of her own children, forever condemning Jason's legacy to tragedy. His quest for the Golden Fleece ultimately led to a hollow victory, marked by sorrow and betrayal. Other notable heroes. While Perseus, Heracles, Theseus, and Jason are among the most well-known heroes of Greek mythology, there are many other figures whose stories also captivate and inspire. Bellerophon and Pegasus. Bellerophon was a hero who tamed the winged horse Pegasus and, with his aid, defeated the Chimera, a fearsome monster with the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and a serpent's tail. However, his tragic flaw led to his downfall. In his pride, Bellerophon attempted to fly to Mount Olympus on Pegasus, but Zeus sent a gadfly to sting the horse, causing Bellerophon to fall to earth and live out his days in misery. Orpheus and Eurydice. Orpheus, the great musician, loved his wife Eurydice deeply. When she died from a snake bite, Orpheus ventured into the underworld to retrieve her. He charmed the gods of the underworld with his music, but they allowed Eurydice to return with him on one condition. He must not look back at her until they had reached the surface. Orpheus, overcome with love and doubt, looked back too soon, losing Eurydice forever. Atalanta the Huntress. Atalanta was a famed huntress and warrior, known for her speed and strength. She was one of the Argonauts and participated in the Caledonian boar hunt. However, her story is most famous for her race against suitors. She agreed to marry anyone who could beat her in a race, but those who failed would be put to death. She was ultimately defeated by Hippomenes, who used 3 golden apples given to him by the goddess Aphrodite to distract her. Daedalus and Icarus. Daedalus, the brilliant inventor, and his son Icarus are famous for their flight from Crete. Daedalus fashioned wings made of feathers and wax to escape the island, but warned Icarus not to fly too close to the sun or too close to the sea. Icarus, however, ignored his father's advice, flew too high, and melted the wax, causing him to fall into the sea and drown. These heroes and their stories continue to resonate with audiences, highlighting the themes of bravery, tragedy, and the inevitable consequences of human pride and ambition. They represent the complexity of Greek mythology, where even the greatest heroes face immense challenges and are not exempt from the whims of fate. Tragic figures and cautionary tales. Icarus, flying too close to the sun. The story of Icarus and his tragic flight is one of the most enduring cautionary tales in Greek mythology, emphasizing the consequences of human overreach and hubris. Daedalus the inventor. Daedalus was a brilliant Athenian craftsman and inventor. He is best known for creating the labyrinth on the island of Crete, a maze designed to imprison the Minotaur, the monstrous half-man, half-bull offspring of King Minos's wife, Pasiphae. Daedalus's invention was so intricate that even he, the architect, could barely navigate it. However, his genius would eventually lead to a tragic fate. Imprisonment by King Minos. After the successful creation of the labyrinth, King Minos, the ruler of Crete, imprisoned Daedalus and his son Icarus in a tower, fearing they might reveal the secrets of the labyrinth to the outside world. In their isolation, Daedalus turned his inventive mind to escape, and he devised a clever plan. He would fashion 2 pairs of wings, one for himself and one for his son, using feathers and wax. Creation of the wings. Daedalus's wings were a marvel of craftsmanship. He meticulously attached feathers together with wax, creating functional, large, and lightweight wings. He instructed Icarus on how to use the wings, warning him not to fly too low, as the damp air would weigh down the wings, nor too high, as the sun's heat would melt the wax. It was a delicate balance, and Daedalus's words carried a deep lesson about moderation and respect for natural forces. Icarus's fatal flight. Despite his father's caution, Icarus, in the exhilaration of flight, became intoxicated by his newfound freedom. As he soared higher and higher into the sky, the sun's heat began to melt the wax in his wings. The wings disintegrated, and Icarus fell into the sea, where he drowned. His body was later found, and the area where he fell became known as the Icarian Sea, a permanent reminder of the consequences of flying too high. Interpretations and symbolism. The myth of Icarus is rich in symbolic meaning. It is often interpreted as a cautionary tale about the dangers of hubris or excessive pride. Icarus's tragic end reflects the consequences of ignoring wisdom and defying natural limits. The myth also symbolizes the human desire for transcendence and the dangers of overreaching. Icarus's flight can be seen as a metaphor for youthful ambition, passion, and the folly of not understanding the limits of one's own abilities or mortality. Oedipus, fate's plaything. The story of Oedipus, the tragic king of Thebes, is one of the most powerful explorations of fate, free will, and self-destruction in Greek mythology. It serves as a profound meditation on the idea that no one can escape their destiny, no matter how hard they try. The prophecy of patricide and incest. Oedipus's tragedy begins with a prophecy delivered to his parents, King Laius and Queen Jocasta of Thebes, by the Oracle of Delphi. The oracle foretold that their son would kill his father and marry his mother. In an effort to prevent this prophecy from coming true, Laius and Jocasta abandoned their newborn son on a mountainside, leaving him to die. However, the child was found and saved by a shepherd, who took him to the king and queen of Corinth, who raised him as their own. Abandoned at birth, Oedipus grew up unaware of his true parentage, believing that King Polybus and Queen Merope of Corinth were his biological parents. As he came of age, he learned of the prophecy that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified by this, Oedipus decided to leave Corinth, determined to escape his fate. Unbeknownst to him, he was running directly toward it. Unwitting fulfillment of fate. On his journey, Oedipus encountered a man on the road and, in a fit of rage, killed him in a quarrel. This man was, in fact, his biological father, King Laius. Oedipus then arrived in Thebes, where he solved the riddle of the Sphinx, a monster that had been terrorizing the city. As a reward for saving Thebes, he was made king and married Jocasta, the widow of Laius, his biological mother, fulfilling the prophecy in the most horrific way. Discovery of the truth. Over time, a plague struck Thebes, and Oedipus sought to discover the cause. He learned that the plague would only end when the murderer of King Laius was found and punished. Oedipus's investigation ultimately led him to the shocking truth. He was the murderer of Laius, and Jocasta was his mother. In horror and despair, Jocasta hanged herself, and Oedipus, unable to bear the shame and the fulfillment of the prophecy, gouged out his own eyes. Self-punishment and exile. Oedipus, in his anguish, chose to exile himself from Thebes, leaving behind his throne and his family. His story is one of the ultimate tragedies in Greek mythology, underscoring the belief in the inescapability of fate. Oedipus's self-inflicted blindness and his journey into exile are emblematic of the tragic consequences of trying to outwit destiny. Narcissus and Echo. The tale of Narcissus and Echo is a poignant exploration of love, self-obsession, and the consequences of vanity. Narcissus's beauty and pride. Narcissus was a young man renowned for his exceptional beauty. He was so enamored with his own reflection that he rejected the love of many admirers, including the nymph Echo. Echo, cursed by Hera to only repeat the last words spoken to her, fell hopelessly in love with Narcissus. However, Narcissus, entranced by his own image, could not return her love. He spurned Echo and all others who sought his affection. Echo's unrequited love. Heartbroken by Narcissus's rejection, Echo withdrew into the forests, where she pined away, wasting away until only her voice remained. Echo's love for Narcissus was tragic in its unrequited nature, and she became a symbol of the suffering that comes from unreturned love. Divine punishment. The gods, angered by Narcissus's cruelty, decided to punish him. They led him to a pool of water, where he saw his own reflection for the first time. Narcissus, unable to tear himself away from the beauty of his reflection, fell in love with it. He became obsessed, unable to move, and eventually died staring at his own image, consumed by his self-love. Transformation into flower and voice. In the place where Narcissus died, a flower sprang up, known as the narcissus or daffodil. This flower symbolized his eternal self-obsession. Meanwhile, Echo's voice, left behind in the forest, continued to repeat the last words spoken to her, a haunting reminder of her unfulfilled love and the consequences of vanity. Arachne the Weaver. The myth of Arachne serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of hubris and the consequences of challenging the gods. Mortal skill versus divine pride. Arachne was a mortal woman known for her extraordinary skill in weaving. She boasted that her talent surpassed even that of Athena, the goddess of wisdom and crafts. Arachne's pride and arrogance led her to challenge Athena to a weaving contest, claiming that her skill could rival that of a goddess. The weaving contest with Athena. Athena accepted the challenge, and the two began to weave. Athena's tapestry depicted scenes of the gods' greatness and beauty, while Arachne's work was a bold and defiant depiction of the gods' flaws and vices. Arachne's tapestry was flawless, but it mocked the gods, especially the gods' misdeeds. Hubris and its consequences. Enraged by Arachne's audacity, Athena destroyed Arachne's tapestry and transformed her into a spider. This punishment was a direct result of Arachne's hubris, her pride in thinking she could surpass the gods. Her transformation into a spider symbolized her eternal punishment and became a reminder of the consequences of arrogance and overweening pride. Transformation into the first spider. As a spider, Arachne continued to weave, but her fate was now one of endless toil. The tale of Arachne highlights the theme of human limitations and the dire consequences of defying divine authority. It also illustrates the eternal struggle between mortal pride and divine power. The Trojan War cycle. Origins of the conflict. The origins of the Trojan War are wrapped in divine intrigue, human passion, and an inescapable prophecy. These events set the stage for one of the greatest and most tragic wars in Greek mythology. The wedding of Peleus and Thetis. The seeds of the Trojan War were planted at the wedding of Peleus, the king of Phthia, and Thetis, a sea nymph. The gods were all invited to the wedding, except Eris, the goddess of discord. Enraged by her exclusion, Eris decided to create chaos. She threw a golden apple into the wedding banquet inscribed with the words, "To the fairest." Eris and the golden apple. Eris's golden apple quickly became a source of discord among the goddesses Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each claimed the apple for herself, arguing that she was the fairest. Unable to resolve the dispute, the goddesses turned to Zeus for judgment. However, Zeus, unwilling to choose between them, entrusted the decision to Paris, the prince of Troy, known for his beauty and fairness. The judgment of Paris. Paris, after much deliberation, awarded the golden apple to Aphrodite, who promised him the love of the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. This decision would have far-reaching consequences, as it ultimately led to the events that sparked the Trojan War. The abduction of Helen, the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta, was renowned for her beauty. Aphrodite's promise to Paris was fulfilled when he traveled to Sparta, where he either seduced or abducted Helen, depending on the version of the myth. Helen's departure with Paris angered Menelaus, who called upon the other Greek kings and warriors to honor their oaths made when Helen had been courted. They had sworn to defend her marriage to whoever was chosen as her husband, setting the stage for the Greek coalition against Troy. The Greek coalition. The Greeks, bound by their oaths to Menelaus, formed a powerful coalition to recover Helen and punish the Trojans for her abduction. This alliance included some of the greatest heroes in Greek mythology. Oath of Helen's suitors. When Helen was courted by numerous suitors, her father, Tyndareus, king of Sparta, was faced with the challenge of choosing her husband. To avoid conflict, he forced all the suitors to swear an oath to defend whichever man was chosen as Helen's husband, thus ensuring that no one would break their word if harm came to Helen. When Paris abducted Helen, this oath was invoked, and the Greek leaders were bound to unite in her defense. Agamemnon as commander. The Greek forces were led by Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae and the brother of Menelaus. Though Agamemnon was a powerful and respected leader, his command was not without challenges. His leadership was often questioned by other Greek heroes, most notably Achilles. Achilles and his divine armor. Achilles, the greatest warrior among the Greeks, was central to the Trojan War. His mother, Thetis, a sea nymph, had made a pact with Zeus to ensure her son's invincibility. Thetis dipped Achilles in the river Styx, making him invulnerable except for his heel. As a result, Achilles became the mightiest of Greek heroes, and he wore divine armor forged by Hephaestus, the god of the forge. His strength and skill in battle were unmatched, but his pride and temper would become major factors in the war. Odysseus's reluctance and deception. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, was another crucial figure in the Greek coalition. Known for his cunning and intelligence, he was initially reluctant to join the war. To avoid going to Troy, Odysseus feigned madness by plowing his fields in a nonsensical manner and sowing salt instead of seed. However, Polymus, a fellow hero, tricked Odysseus by placing his son Telemachus in front of the plow. Odysseus's love for his son revealed his ruse, and he was forced to join the war. His strategic mind would later prove invaluable to the Greeks. Key episodes in the war. The Trojan War was a brutal and protracted conflict, marked by key moments that shaped its outcome and the fates of the heroes involved. The sacrifice of Iphigenia. Early in the war, the Greek fleet was stranded at Aulis due to unfavorable winds, and the seer Calchas revealed that the goddess Artemis required the sacrifice of Agamemnon's daughter, Iphigenia, to allow the Greeks to sail to Troy. Though Agamemnon was initially reluctant, he ultimately agreed, and Iphigenia was sacrificed to appease Artemis. In some versions of the myth, Iphigenia is saved at the last moment by the goddess, but this act of sacrifice remained a source of great pain for Agamemnon and would haunt his family. Achilles' wrath and withdrawal. One of the central events of the war was Achilles' wrath and his temporary withdrawal from the fighting. Agamemnon, in a dispute over the war prize Briseis, took Achilles' slave woman, leading Achilles to withdraw from the battle in anger. This decision had devastating consequences for the Greeks, as their greatest warrior refused to fight, leaving the Greeks vulnerable. The death of Patroclus. With Achilles absent from the battlefield, the Trojans gained the upper hand. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, begged Achilles to let him wear his armor and lead the Greeks in battle. Achilles reluctantly agreed, but Patroclus was killed by Hector, the Trojan prince, in a fierce battle. Patroclus's death drove Achilles into a rage, and he vowed to return to the fight to avenge his friend. Hector versus Achilles. The confrontation between Hector and Achilles is one of the most iconic moments of the Trojan War. Achilles, enraged by the death of Patroclus, sought out Hector, the Trojan prince. In a duel to the death, Achilles killed Hector and dragged his body behind his chariot in a fit of anger. Hector's body was later returned to the Trojans for a proper burial, but the death of Hector marked the beginning of the end for Troy. The divine participants and their favorites, the gods, played a significant role in the Trojan War, each favoring different sides. Zeus remained neutral for much of the war, while other gods took sides. Athena and Hera supported the Greeks, while Aphrodite, Apollo, and Ares sided with the Trojans. The gods often intervened in the battles, either directly or through prophecies, shaping the course of the war. The fall of Troy. The fall of Troy was the culmination of the war, marked by both divine intervention and mortal cunning. The stratagem of the wooden horse. The Greeks, unable to breach the walls of Troy, resorted to a clever trick. They constructed a massive wooden horse, hollowed out to hold a small group of Greek warriors. The Greeks left the horse as an offering to the gods, signaling their withdrawal from the war. The Trojans, believing that the Greeks had finally given up, brought the horse inside the city as a trophy. However, the Greeks had hidden soldiers inside the horse, who emerged at night and opened the gates of Troy to allow the Greek army to enter the city. Sack of the city. The Greeks, having gained entry to Troy, launched a brutal assault on the city. The Trojans, caught off guard, were quickly overwhelmed. The city was sacked, and the surviving Trojans were either killed or taken captive. Priam, the king of Troy, was slain by Achilles' son Neoptolemus, marking the tragic end of the Trojan royal line. Fate of the Trojan women. The Trojan women suffered terribly after the fall of Troy. Many were taken as slaves, including Helen, who was returned to Menelaus. The fate of the women who survived the sack of Troy is one of the most tragic aspects of the war, with their lives marked by loss and suffering. The gods' reactions to Troy's destruction. The gods had varying reactions to the destruction of Troy. While some, like Athena and Hera, rejoiced at the fall of the city, others, such as Apollo and Aphrodite, mourned the loss of their favored city. The gods' involvement in the war had been decisive, but in the end, they allowed mortal cunning to bring about Troy's fall. The returns, aftermath of Troy. Odysseus's 10-year journey. Odysseus's journey home after the fall of Troy was one of the most famous aspects of Greek mythology. His adventures, chronicled in the Odyssey, included numerous trials and encounters with gods and monsters. Conflict with Poseidon. After the fall of Troy, Odysseus and his men set sail for Ithaca, but they incurred the wrath of Poseidon, the god of the sea, for blinding his son, the Cyclops Polyphemus. Poseidon made Odysseus's journey home incredibly difficult, causing storms and delays. The Cyclops Polyphemus. One of the most famous episodes in Odysseus's journey was his encounter with Polyphemus, the Cyclops. Odysseus and his men were trapped in the Cyclops' cave, and to escape, they devised a clever plan to blind the giant. This act of cunning angered Poseidon and prolonged Odysseus's journey. Circe and magical transformation. Odysseus and his men visited the island of the enchantress Circe, who turned some of them into pigs. However, with the help of the god Hermes, Odysseus resisted Circe's magic and convinced her to help him. Circe gave Odysseus advice on how to navigate the dangers ahead, including the Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. The Sirens, Scylla, and Charybdis. Odysseus and his men encountered the Sirens, whose singing lured sailors to their doom. They also faced the twin monsters Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla was a multi-headed monster, and Charybdis was a deadly whirlpool. Odysseus navigated these dangers with great skill and determination, though many of his men perished. 7 years with Calypso. After many years of wandering, Odysseus was shipwrecked on the island of the nymph Calypso. She took him as her lover and kept him on her island for 7 years, offering him immortality if he stayed with her. Eventually, Odysseus was allowed to leave, though he still had more challenges ahead. Return to Ithaca and vengeance. After 20 years of absence, Odysseus finally returned to Ithaca. Disguised as a beggar, he plotted his revenge against the suitors who had overrun his palace and courted his wife, Penelope. With the help of his son Telemachus, Odysseus killed the suitors and reclaimed his throne. Agamemnon's tragic homecoming. Agamemnon's return to Mycenae was also marked by tragedy, as he was betrayed by his wife Clytemnestra. Clytemnestra's betrayal. Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, had been furious with him for sacrificing their daughter Iphigenia at the start of the Trojan War. While Agamemnon was away, Clytemnestra took a lover, Aegisthus, and plotted her husband's death. Murder of the returning king. Upon Agamemnon's return, Clytemnestra welcomed him with apparent warmth. However, she had set a trap for him, and she murdered him as he entered the palace. This act of treachery marked the beginning of a cycle of vengeance within Agamemnon's family. Orestes and Electra's revenge. Agamemnon's son, Orestes, eventually returned to Mycenae and avenged his father's murder by killing Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. The murder, however, marked Orestes' descent into madness, as he was pursued by the Furies for matricide. The cycle of familial violence. Agamemnon's family was trapped in a cycle of violence and revenge, with each generation's actions leading to further bloodshed. The consequences of Agamemnon's choices echoed through his descendants, underscoring the tragic nature of the house of Atreus. Aeneas and the future of Rome. Aeneas, a Trojan hero and the son of Aphrodite, played a crucial role in the aftermath of Troy's destruction. Escape from burning Troy. As Troy fell, Aeneas escaped with his father, Anchises, and his son, Ascanius. With the help of the gods, he led a group of survivors from Troy in search of a new homeland. Divine mission to found a new city. Aeneas's journey was guided by divine prophecy. The gods, particularly Apollo and Hera, sent him on a mission to found a new city, which would eventually become the Roman Empire. This prophecy and Aeneas's journey to Italy marked the beginning of Rome's legendary foundation. Journey to Italy. Aeneas's journey was fraught with challenges, including battles with other peoples and encounters with the gods. His journey was also marked by deep emotional struggles, including his love for the Queen of Carthage, Dido, which ended tragically when Aeneas left her to fulfill his destiny. Legacy that transcends Greece. Aeneas's journey to Italy and his eventual founding of Rome placed him at the center of Roman mythology. His story was later immortalized by the Roman poet Virgil in the Iliad, where Aeneas was portrayed as a founding father of the Roman people. His journey bridged the gap between Greek and Roman mythologies, ensuring his legacy lived on beyond the fall of Troy. The underworld and afterlife. Geography of the underworld. The underworld in Greek mythology was a realm that lay beyond the world of the living, governed by Hades, the god of the dead. It was a dark and mysterious place, described in various myths as a land of both punishment and reward, depending on one's deeds in life. The 5 rivers. Styx. The river Styx was the most famous river of the underworld, known for its role in the crossing of souls to the afterlife. Souls of the dead had to be ferried across the Styx by Charon, the ferryman, to reach their final destination. The Styx was also the river by which the gods swore their most solemn oaths. Acheron, often described as the river of pain or woe, the Acheron was the first river encountered by souls after death. It was the river that Charon crossed while taking souls to the underworld. Lethe, the river of forgetfulness, where the souls of the dead drank water to forget their past lives. This was part of the process for reincarnation or for peace in the afterlife. Phlegethon, the river of fire, flowing with burning hot water or lava. It was often associated with punishment, leading into the deeper parts of Tartarus, where the worst criminals were tortured. Cocytus, known as the river of wailing, it was said to be a place of sorrow and lament, where souls cried out in anguish. Charon the ferryman. Charon was the grim ferryman who carried souls across the rivers of the underworld, particularly the Styx, to their final resting place. He demanded payment for his service, which was usually a coin placed in the mouth of the deceased, often referred to as an obelisk. Souls without this payment were left wandering the banks of the river. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. At the gates of the underworld stood Cerberus, a fearsome 3-headed dog, guarding the entrance to prevent the dead from escaping. Cerberus was a terrifying creature, known for his strength and viciousness, but sometimes, heroes such as Heracles were able to subdue or trick him to gain access to the underworld. Regions. Asphodel Fields. The Asphodel Fields were where ordinary souls, those who had neither been exceptionally good nor bad, wandered after death. These souls were not punished nor rewarded but simply existed in a shadowy, monotonous existence. Elysium, also known as the Elysian Fields, Elysium was a paradise reserved for those who had lived virtuous lives or were favored by the gods. Souls in Elysium enjoyed a peaceful afterlife filled with joy and happiness, and it was often portrayed as a blissful meadow. Tartarus. Tartarus was the deepest and most horrifying part of the underworld, a place of torment and punishment for the worst offenders, both mortal and divine. It was not only a dungeon of suffering but also the place where the Titans were imprisoned after their defeat in the Titanomachy. Famous inhabitants and their punishments. Several well-known figures in Greek mythology are condemned to suffer eternally in the underworld, their punishments symbolizing human weaknesses and flaws. Sisyphus and his boulder. Sisyphus was a cunning and deceitful king who defied the gods and tricked death. As punishment, he was condemned to roll a massive boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down each time he neared the top. His eternal struggle became a symbol of futile labor and the consequences of hubris, as his punishment could never be completed. Tantalus and unreachable food. Tantalus was a king who committed grievous crimes, including killing his son Pelops and serving him as food to the gods. For his heinous actions, he was sentenced to stand in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree. However, whenever he tried to drink, the water would recede, and whenever he reached for the fruit, the branches would rise out of his grasp. This eternal torment became the basis for the term tantalizing. The Danaids and their leaking jars. The Danaids were the 50 daughters of Danaus, who, at the command of their father, killed their husbands on their wedding night. As punishment, they were condemned to fill a bottomless jar with water, but the jar had a hole in it, and no matter how much water they poured in, it would never fill. This endless, futile task symbolized the consequences of murder and betrayal. Ixion on the flaming wheel. Ixion was a king who attempted to seduce Hera, the wife of Zeus. As punishment, Zeus bound Ixion to a wheel that was set aflame and sent spinning forever in the sky. His torment was meant to be a warning against defying the gods and attempting to commit adultery with a divine being. Heroes who journeyed to the underworld. Several heroic figures in Greek mythology ventured into the underworld, either seeking knowledge, rescuing loved ones, or attempting to complete impossible tasks. Orpheus seeking Eurydice. Orpheus, the famed musician and poet, descended into the underworld in search of his wife, Eurydice, who had died from a snake bite. Moved by his music, Hades allowed Orpheus to bring Eurydice back to the world of the living, on the condition that he not look back at her until they had reached the surface. Unfortunately, Orpheus could not resist the temptation and turned to look at Eurydice, causing her to be lost to him forever. Heracles capturing Cerberus. One of Heracles' 12 labors was to capture Cerberus, the three-headed dog guarding the gates of the underworld. Armed with his immense strength and aided by the gods, Heracles ventured into the underworld, where he wrestled Cerberus into submission and brought him back to the mortal world. This labor was one of the most difficult and dangerous of his tasks. Odysseus consulting Tiresias. During his long journey home after the fall of Troy, Odysseus was instructed by the sorceress Circe to travel to the underworld to seek the advice of the prophet Tiresias. There, Odysseus spoke with the spirit of Tiresias, who foretold the rest of his journey and the challenges he would face, including the wrath of Poseidon and the eventual death of his crew. Psyche's quest for Aphrodite. Psyche, a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty, was sent by Venus, Aphrodite, to the underworld to retrieve a box containing beauty from Persephone. Psyche had to endure several challenges, including the perilous journey to the underworld, where she had to navigate a series of trials. Her eventual success in these tasks, including her encounter with Persephone, led to her reunion with her husband, Cupid, and her ascension to immortality. The underworld and afterlife plays a crucial role in Greek mythology, as it represents the final destination for souls after death and the consequences of one's actions during their life. It is a place where both justice and mercy are meted out, and it reveals the Greek understanding of mortality, fate, and the eternal struggle between life and death. Philosophical and cultural legacy. Greek myths as moral framework. Greek myths have served as a rich source of moral and ethical lessons for centuries, offering insight into human nature, the consequences of actions, and the relationship between mortals and gods. These stories were not merely entertaining but were often used to teach important moral principles. Lessons about human limitations. Greek mythology emphasizes the limitations of human beings. Heroes, despite their strength and wisdom, often fall victim to their own flaws. For example, Achilles, though nearly invincible, is undone by his rage and pride. These stories highlight that no matter how powerful one becomes, humans are always bound by fate and the will of the gods. Warnings against excessive pride. Hubris, or excessive pride, is a recurring theme in Greek mythology. Many heroes and mortals are punished for defying the gods or acting arrogantly. Examples include Arachne, who was transformed into a spider for challenging Athena's weaving skills, and Narcissus, whose pride led to his tragic demise. These myths taught the importance of humility and respect for divine authority. Importance of balance and moderation. The Greeks valued balance in all things, as exemplified by the concept of sophrosyne, moderation. The myths often show how extremes lead to disaster, whether through love, vengeance, or ambition. For instance, the tale of Icarus warns against overambition, as flying too close to the sun results in his downfall. Respect for divine and natural law. Greek myths also emphasize the importance of respecting the divine and natural order. The gods, although often vengeful, represented forces that were beyond human control. Disrespecting the gods or failing to honor natural laws often led to suffering. The myth of Antigone, who defied the king's orders to bury her brother, shows the consequences of disobeying divine law. Transition to philosophical thought. As Greek civilization progressed, the importance of mythology began to evolve. Early philosophers critiqued and reinterpreted these myths, seeing them not just as stories but as allegories and teachings about human existence. Early Greek philosophers' critique of myths. Philosophers like Heraclitus and Pythagoras questioned the literal truth of myths, suggesting instead that they contained deeper truths about the nature of the universe. Plato, in particular, used myths to explore philosophical concepts, such as the nature of the soul and the afterlife, famously in works like The Republic. The universal appeal of Greek mythology. Greek mythology has maintained its allure for thousands of years, captivating audiences across cultures and generations. Its stories transcend time and space because they speak to universal human experiences, emotions, and desires. The themes explored in Greek myths, such as love, jealousy, betrayal, fate, revenge, and redemption, resonate deeply with the human psyche, making these tales eternally relevant. Timeless human themes. At the heart of Greek mythology is the exploration of what it means to be human, our strengths, our flaws, and our struggles. The gods themselves reflect human qualities, both noble and flawed. Zeus's power and occasional lack of self-control mirror the complexity of leadership and authority, while the tragic fates of characters like Oedipus and Icarus remind us of the consequences of pride and the inexorable pull of destiny. These themes are not confined to the ancient world but are reflected in modern lives. Love, suffering, ambition, and the struggle for justice continue to shape the human experience today. Psychological depth of characters. Greek mythology is remarkable for the psychological complexity of its characters, whether mortal or divine. The gods, unlike mere archetypes of good or evil, display traits that range from selfishness to selflessness, wisdom to folly. For example, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, also demonstrates the potential for cold strategy and manipulation. Similarly, while Apollo is a god of music and beauty, his stories often reveal his darker impulses, such as his punishment of Daphne or his rivalry with Marsyas. Mortal figures, too, are multifaceted. Heroes like Heracles are often defined by their virtues, but also by tragic flaws that lead to their downfall. This blend of virtues and vices makes the characters of Greek mythology profoundly human and relatable. Versatility and adaptability of narratives. The adaptability of Greek myths is another reason for their lasting appeal. Over centuries, these myths have been retold in numerous forms, from epic poetry to plays, and from Renaissance paintings to modern movies and television shows. The core narratives, while remaining largely the same, have been shaped by different cultures, time periods, and artistic interpretations. For example, The myth of the Trojan War has inspired everything from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey to Virgil's Aeneid, and it has been adapted into countless films, books, and plays. The universality of the core themes allows these ancient stories to continually evolve, while still retaining their original emotional and moral power. Living mythology. The enduring legacy of Greek mythology lies not just in its ability to be told again and again, but in its continuing evolution. The myths are not static relics of the past, but living, breathing stories that adapt to the present and reflect contemporary concerns. They are foundational narratives that inform our understanding of ourselves, our societies, and the world around us. How Greek myths continue to evolve. In modern times, Greek myths have evolved in numerous ways, being reimagined in novels, films, and television shows. New interpretations breathe life into these ancient tales, allowing them to resonate with modern audiences. For instance, Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series revitalized interest in Greek mythology among younger generations, making the gods and heroes relatable to a new, global audience. Similarly, films like 300 and Troy bring ancient stories to life on the big screen, presenting them with a modern sensibility while maintaining the core mythological elements. These adaptations underscore the ongoing relevance of the myths, as they are reshaped to reflect the values, concerns, and aesthetics of the present day. Their role in understanding the human condition. Greek myths provide insight into fundamental aspects of the human condition, our fears, hopes, desires, and struggles. They remind us that we are not alone in facing the complexities of life. Myths like the Odyssey portray the long and arduous journey to find home, something that resonates with anyone who has experienced displacement or the longing for a sense of belonging. The story of Prometheus, who defies Zeus to give fire to humanity, raises questions about the costs of knowledge and the conflict between freedom and authority, echoing ongoing debates in our own society. The themes of Greek mythology transcend their ancient origins, allowing them to serve as a mirror through which we examine ourselves and our place in the world. The power of mythic structure in modern storytelling. The structure of Greek myths is timeless, providing a framework for understanding the arcs of personal transformation, heroism, and tragedy. Modern storytellers continue to draw upon this mythic structure to craft narratives that resonate with audiences. The hero's journey, as exemplified by figures like Heracles, Theseus, and Odysseus, has been adopted in modern fiction, including in the Star Wars saga and The Lord of the Rings. These structures, with their stages of call to adventure, trials, triumph, and return, provide a universal blueprint for the heroic narrative. Similarly, the tragic arcs found in figures like Oedipus and Icarus continue to influence modern storytelling. Whether in literature, film, or theater, the structure of a hero's fall, be it due to fate, hubris, or internal conflict, remains one of the most compelling ways to examine the limits of human potential. Tragedy remains a powerful vehicle for exploring human suffering and the consequences of our actions. Why we still need these ancient stories? Despite the advances of modern science and the rise of rationalism, the need for myths has not diminished. Greek mythology continues to offer valuable lessons about the human experience, providing a lens through which we can confront the complexities of our own lives. These stories remind us that we are part of a larger, shared history, a history that reflects our collective aspirations, struggles, and dreams. Myths allow us to explore the limits of human knowledge, the unpredictability of fate, and the ongoing battle between our ideals and our flaws. Moreover, Greek mythology provides a way to make sense of the world around us. While scientific explanations may offer rational answers to questions about the natural world, mythology speaks to the emotional and spiritual dimensions of human existence. In times of hardship or uncertainty, these ancient stories provide comfort, meaning, and a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves. They remind us that though we may struggle and suffer, we are part of a grand and enduring narrative that stretches across time.